Welcome to Spiritual Breakfast. I'm your host, Jen Weir, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about loving your neighbor, loving your friends, and who are they. If you caught yesterday's on Memorial Day, this will just flow along with that. We do these spiritual breakfasts so that you can get a little morsel, at least into your spirit, and hopefully it just whets your appetite to dive in and feed more than your flesh and your soul, but really cause your spirit to prosper. Today's passage is going to come from the book of Matthew, chapter 22, in verses 36 through 40, and I will read it from, let's go ahead and read it from the Passion Translation. I flip back and forth between two different, the NASB and the Passion, really simply because I love how rich and full the Passion Translation gets it. And it will, like I say, we'll start in verse 26, verse 36. So a little bit of backstory. These Pharisees and Sadducees, they were wanting to trap him, and one of the religious scholars, also called a lawyer, was like, I got one. Watch this, guys. Like, you can just see it, right? He's so arrogant and bold. He says this, "Teacher, which commandment is the law, is the greatest?" And I love how Jesus is just so kind. Like, I just picture him being like, you knuckleheads. Come on. It says this, Jesus answered him, "Love the Lord your God with every passion of your heart, with all the energy of your being, and with every thought that is within you. This is the great and supreme commandment," right? Like, what else could God want us to do is but love him with everything that we are and everything that we have. He goes on to say this, "And the second is like it in importance. You must love your friend," or your neighbor, it says in other translations, "in the same way you love yourself. Contained within these commandments to love, you will find all the meaning of the law and the prophets." And see, what I find interesting in another story, somebody says, "Who's my neighbor anyway? Like, who do I gotta love? Come on. I've kept this law, that law, this thing." And he's like, "Let me tell you a story." And he tells a story about someone who those Jews would be like, "Oh gosh, they're disgusting." It's like the ultimate of racism, right? He's like, "Yeah, that guy's your neighbor," just so we're clear. And so Jesus calls us to love our neighbor as ourself, to love God with everything that we are. You know, I think in today's day, everybody wants to just do what they can to get to heaven or do all these right things, and I think that's going to save them. But here's the deal. We're saved by grace through faith, not of our own works, so that anyone can boast. Nobody can say, "Oh, I did this. I got myself into heaven." It's just because of what Jesus did. But here's the thing. When we look at the commandments, see, God gave Moses 10 of them to show, hey, these are my standards. And you people cannot keep up with this. So I'm gonna need to send my son, but once a year, you're gonna do a sacrifice that covers all your misgivings on these. And the commandments were the first 5. They're broken up into ways to love your God. Like honor your mom and dad. No, actually, I'm sorry. That's actually in loving your neighbor. Don't take his name in vain. Love him with all your heart. All of these things, the things that we do, keep the Sabbath, that sort of thing. The rest of the commandments, the last 5 are, don't want your neighbor's stuff, don't want their wife, don't want their husband, don't want their ox, all that, like, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, all of these things. So all of the law, the commandments are summed up in those. And the thing is this, in order to love God with every fiber of your being, in order to love your neighbor as yourself, you must be filled with the Holy Spirit. You must have Jesus in you. There is no way that you could possibly love God, that you could possibly love your neighbor as yourself without that. And the oil that I will mention, I mentioned it last time, but it's valor. If you are going to follow this for a couple of days now and you have been following, you're going to hear a lot of things from this. It's going to take some courage. The oil valor from Young Living goes into your bones. The frequency is set at the same frequency as your bones. It gets right into the cell, right in there, and it gives you strength and courage so that you can walk out what God is calling you to do, which can be a little tricky when it comes to loving your neighbor. We'll see you next time on Spiritual Breakfast.